Sail away Dieter and Ping stayed in San Francisco for a few extra days after Toulouse memorial service to help Meg sort through belongings. To celebrate their new domestic partnership, Meg encouraged the two fairies to take several bunches of flowers to the courthouse. Pass them out to whoever you see. Toulouse would like that. So many extras were left. Way more than we needed to stuff the paper origami boat with flowers. Alone in her Victorian flat, Meg used memories of the day to keep her company as she cleaned up after the post-memorial service party. Meg took a break from her chores to record some highlights of the day in her fairy journal. The journal made of handmade paper, embedded with herbs and flowers from the fairy sanctuary. It would become a safe for memories, a place to honor important things related to the fairies. With words and poems, scraps of hair and patches of cloth, sprinkles of iridescent fairy dust made its way to each page, creating a book worthy of display in a museum. The book had only 7 blank pages left. Meg already started to make the paper that would become the next volume of the fairy archives. This time she used a trick that Toulouse suggested to make the paper stronger. Gather up some thin cotton underwear and stick it in bleach for 24 hours. Cut it up into small pieces and fill the blender with 1/2 water and 1/2 underwear. Let it rip. Use the pulp to mix in with the herbs and flowers. It's a great way to recycle cotton and will make very durable paper. She shut her eyes and rested her feet up on the large silk pillow that added Asian color and patterns to her undyed hemp couch. Had someone pulled the plug on her charger? Meg closed her eyes and easily visualized the 24-foot sailboat. How it pulled away from the dock in Sausalito, making slurpy sounds as it glided into the San Francisco Bay. It felt like the boat slid on glass, with few waves to break the path. There was a spectacular view of the Berkeley Hills that were seated between the edge of the water and the top of the sky. Like a scene from a plein-air painting, the East Bay's mix of houses and lush vegetation had a comforting European look. On the opposite side of the bay, white haze turned the view of San Francisco into a backdrop befitting a movie. The sunlight diffused by the mist, the scene looked like it was artfully shot through a soft focus lens. Everything turned black and white, like in a film noir film. A fuzzy spray of mist made everything feel cool and damp, a result of the thick fog that hung close to the water. Memorial donations provided enough money to rent a boat that was not too big and not too small. It was large enough to fit a dozen mourners on deck, so the gathering felt cozy, but not claustrophobic. No one said a word after the mourners stepped foot on the boat. It is rare for a group of fairies to be in the same space without someone talking. The fairies began to confer nods and hugs to Toulouse widow Cacao. "Lucky I wore the waterproof mascara," was the only thing Cacao said. Each fairy had to struggle to keep balance as waves sloshed up onto the slick wooden deck. The rocking motion reminded Pat of how she rocked her son Toulouse asleep when he was an infant. The same motion reminded Jay of massages she gave Toulouse. Near the end, Toulouse didn't want to be seen, let alone touched. He wanted his process to unfold without intervention, and the hospice became his cloister for his healing opportunities. He would protect himself from being petted out of pity. He even insisted that his partner Cacao only visit twice a week. In his place, Jay and Meg became his caregiver. He felt under attack by those mean purple blotches, KS lesions that popped up like spring wildflowers, and he would have picked them all, if only he could. Of all the sickening aspects of AIDS, Toulouse had the least patience for the dark, splotchy lesions. He imagined they were all connected. A mass of tangled dark roots made their way into the center of his being. Hungry taproots that dug into his heart. "The lesions live off my emotion," Toulouse told Jay one night as they played the card game Hearts. "They suck. Like bedbugs suck your blood. These suckers drain me. They seem to live off the joy and hope I once found so easy to rely on." Though any medical doctor wouldn't validate his theory, the observation was right on. The KS lesions poisoned him, his easygoing manner, and his connections to his beloved friends. As they grew larger, his reluctance to be seen or touched also grew. In honor of Toulouse's paper folding skills, Jay wore her handmade origami crane earrings to the memorial service. A symbol of generosity, he gave her the cranes the day before he passed away. Like many people that stand on the threshold to life beyond, Toulouse knew when his time was near. He had visions of friends standing in the room, heard faint bells and singing, and felt a wave of light pass through him. That was when one of his spiritual teachers, Sai Baba, visited him in a daydream. And at night he saw Saint Anthrax standing at the foot of his bed. Smiling and touching her heart, she sent him blessings of love, love, love. One everyday night, Jay listened as her friend told her of the visitations. He had weakened to the point that she had to hold Toulouse up in bed so he wouldn't fall off his pillow. He leaned in and put his head on her shoulder, then whispered in his soft, gentle voice, "Thank Goddess for you, Jay. You appeared as a miracle. They said you were sent down by blessed beings high above as my lovely living guardian angel. You are my kind, loving angel of death. Jay thought about those things during awkward moments of silence during the memorial service. Memories seemed to get all shaken together with events of the moment, and the past came more present as Jay remembered other kind souls who faced death squarely in the face. Perhaps they landed somewhere where they would be rewarded for their bravery, honored with a blink, a glimpse into the mystery of life and what lies beyond. Jay lifted the snow-white paper origami boat out of the ceramic box Genie had crafted. A glorious box, decorated with gemstones, sparkles, fairy dust, and inlaid with the picture of Toulouse as a handsome, healthy, happy fairy. The picture helped make the service seem more real and reminded the group of happy times when Toulouse lived at the sanctuary. That was before he refused to take his medications. Toulouse became resistant to the drugs and simply wanted to live life on its own terms. He wanted to discover how his life would write its own story. Curious to see how the story would unfold into a natural conclusion, he felt no further need for toxic intervention. What Toulouse needed was time. His existence seemed to revolve around medical appointments, getting ready to go to the doctor, traveling to the doctor, waiting in the waiting room to see the doctor, spending 20 minutes with the doctor, taking the prescription from the doctor to the pharmacist, waiting for the medicines, traveling back home. The longest chunk of time was the most welcome, a time of rest from exhaustion of traveling and waiting. Toulouse survived times where he felt alone, shocked and outcast by his culture and government. The tall and proud fairy protested on the streets in the early 80s. Those times when AIDS drugs were withheld from the first HIV-positive individuals. And he continued his activism as the life-extending drugs were released with a price tag that only young millionaires could afford. His story chronicled the life of a loving activist, a hero for the young gay men he took under his wing. That is one reason Toulouse insisted on a dignified end to his story. And as the time grew near, he held a meeting of the fairies. Toulouse spoke of how he loved to wake up to the calls of the raven in the garden, how he valued the irreplaceable memories of being together at gatherings, how the open space of the fairy sanctuary drew him into an undeniable sense of being in the source. It all came together flawlessly. During the end of his sharing, he offered a few messages that came from within. There is no greater blessing than the simple joy of being in life. To be life as it unfolds from moment to moment. That's when Toulouse announced his vow. I will live each moment to its fullest. I will stay present right up to my last breath on earth and beyond. That was how Toulouse approached his last year. Feeling crappy or feeling weak, hallucinating, stammering, or having problems walking upstairs, Toulouse took it all in stride. Many were puzzled that, in the face of a terminal illness, he could be so deeply content. Toulouse folded origami right up to the last hour of his life. When Jay answered the call at 2 a.m. and raced to the hospice in order not to be too late, the nurse on duty handed her a crane, gave her a hug, wiped away her drool and tears, then broke the news she already knew. Toulouse said, "Fly free, blessed be." The next morning, Meg discovered the origami sailboat. Placed inside the top drawer of Toulouse's hospice dresser, the paper boat fit perfectly inside Genie's ornate box. A week before his passing, Toulouse told Meg about the plan to fold his personal paper sailboat. Meg thought the fever had made him delirious. "Yes, that sounds wonderful, Toulouse. You fold amazing sailboats." Late one night, Toulouse asked for his special paper he made at the fairy sanctuary. Out of old underwear, dried flowers, herbs, and feathers. He turned on his small blue fairy nightlight, blessed the paper, centered himself, and began to fold. As he formed each crease, he recited a blessing. May all beings dwell in the open heart. May all beings be peaceful. May all beings be happy. Each fold carried its own message pressed into the paper. Toulouse placed the boat in the box and wrote a small note that he set on top of the box. A resting place for me. A boat much easier to make than building my own pine box. On the day of his memorial, the paper sailboat overflowed with flower buds, fairy sparkles, tiny folded cranes, and messages written by his friends. Meg nestled a tiny hand-blow glass bottle into the center of the origami boat. Taken care of like a much-loved child, some of Toulouse's ashes rested inside the bottle that was wrapped with the silk-embroidered funeral blanket. The tiny package looked like a precious and unusual offering, one you might see on a Day of the Dead altar. They all knew when the right time to release the boat had arrived. Meg laughed at the irony, seeing how difficult it is to get most fairies to agree on anything. The passengers on the boat nodded, then moved closer to each other. The foghorn on Alcatraz blew. Then, in a frozen moment in time, seagulls appeared. Startled from the horn, the large white birds flew straight toward the boat. This was far better than a salute from the Blue Angels. Nature and the guardian angels came together to give their final salute to Toulouse. The winged ones circled the top of the sailboat and called out, and seagull talk.